The verdict reads as follows as to each count. On count one, it says, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty. On counts 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, the verdict reads, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Of felony murder, 2 counts, aggravated battery, 2 counts, and cruelty to child in the first degree. Y'all can have a seat.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the court bench. In early 2024, the town of Donisville, Georgia was rocked when their reigning pageant queen Trinity Poague was arrested for a crime so brutal it defied her perfect public image. The victim was 18-month-old Jackson Drew Angels, or JD, the son of her boyfriend. While JD's father was out picking up a pizza, he left the toddler alone with Trinity in her college dorm for just about 35 minutes. By the time he returned, JD was unresponsive and later pronounced dead. Today, we're looking at the high-stakes closing arguments in the moment this former beauty queen finally hears the jury's decision. Let's go ahead and first jump into the prosecutor's closing arguments, where he absolutely rips into Trinity Poague. Let's jump in.
The question for you to answer as a jury is this: who could have caused the trauma that killed this baby within the time frame that it had to have occurred? Okay? No telling. In any number of things, any number of people, any number of circumstances could certainly have caused severe trauma to this child at some point in time. But that's not really the question. The question is, who could have caused this trauma within the time frame that you have available? There's an answer to that question. From 8 o'clock p.m. Saturday night, when they were in Albany, Georgia, on January 13th, 2024, until about 12:30 Sunday afternoon, January 14th, okay, for that whole time period, there was only one person who was ever alone with this child. One. There was one person who was ever alone with him for any period of time during that 16 and a half hours. You know who that was? That person was Trinity Poague. Not only that, ladies and gentlemen, when you focus on this time period and you reduce it down to the time during the time frame that the doctors talked about, the time immediately prior to the onset of the symptoms, the answer becomes clearer. One person was along with JD during the time immediately before his symptoms appeared. That one person was Trinity Poague. At 11:55 a.m. on Sunday, J.D. Angelus was a healthy little boy. By 12:30 p.m., he was in a literal death countdown. It wasn't a question anymore as to whether or not he might live. It wasn't a question anymore as to whether he could be saved. It wasn't a question anymore as to whether he would ever be able to grow up. By 12:30 p.m., at 12:30 p.m., he was dying. There were symptoms that appeared during this time frame that appeared when Julian Williams, Jay Williams, when he pulled up to the dorm and he got out of his car and he went inside to pick up that child. Actually went inside to put down the pizza and the drinks because he thought they were going to have lunch. But when he went in and he picked up that child, there were immediate symptoms that the child was suffering right then. The child was essentially unconscious. Okay? The testimony is that his head was limp, that he couldn't hold his head up, that his body was limp, that his head was bobbling around. He was nauseated. Before he got to the car, or as he was getting into the car, the child threw up all over his daddy. He was he was draining CSF, cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, the fluid that circles your brain, that encircles your brain, that helps protect you from impacts, that helps protect your brain from shock, from harm. Okay, that fluid, by the time he got to the hospital, was literally coming out of his nose and his mouth. It was no longer contained here where it's supposed to be. It was here because of the head injury he had suffered. He was in cardiac or respiratory, cardiac and respiratory arrest at that time. When he got to the hospital, he wasn't breathing and he didn't have a pulse. Those symptoms, when you go back to the time frame that the doctors established, those symptoms would have had the impact that caused them, the impact that caused those symptoms would have had to have occurred within minutes before the child presented at the hospital. During those 35 minutes that we're talking about, okay, these 35 minutes right here, 11:55 to 12:30, during those 35 minutes, one person and only one person was alone with that child. Trinity Poague. To think about some of this, ladies and gentlemen. You have a circumstance where you have two people in a room. We see this in cases that get presented. I mean, I guess prosecutors everywhere see it at some point or another. You have two people in a room. One of them ends up dead. There's a fight. One of them ends up dead. Okay? You would think that's an easy case, right? Like, you have two people, one's dead, now we know who did it. Okay? But those aren't typically easy cases. And the reason they're not easy cases is because the person who is alive says, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault. He attacked me. He threatened me. He did this. He did that. I was fighting for my life. Or he angered me so badly that I didn't really have a choice. I was overcome by the emotion of the moment, so it should be voluntary manslaughter or something like that. Okay? So there's a myriad of issues that sort of layer on top of each other when you have two people in a room. Except in this circumstance. Okay? Because the two people in the room during those 35 minutes were J.D. Angelus and the defendant. Those are the two people who were in there. There's not an argument that can potentially, possibly, in this universe or beyond, there's no argument that can be made that it was caused by the child, that the child, was aggressive, that the child was the initial aggressor, that the child, attacked her and she had to defend herself. Okay? So it makes the two people in a room situation, instead of it being a hard case anymore, it becomes an easy one.
This prosecutor is certainly doing his job. At the initial start of his argument, the prosecutor was using what we call window of opportunity. This is a classic move in cases built on circumstantial evidence, which this one certainly was. Under Georgia Code Section 24-14-6, to convict on circumstantial evidence, the facts must include every other reasonable hypothesis except guilt. Initially, by proving JD was perfectly fine at 11:55 a.m. and dying by 12:30 p.m., and that Trinity was the only adult present during those 35 minutes, the state is systematically deleting every other possible hypothesis the defense might try to offer. And then this prosecutor flips the script on the two people in a room scenario. In a typical fight between two adults, you might have arguments over self-defense or provocation, but here, the other quote-unquote person was an 18-month-old baby. A toddler cannot be the initial aggressor under the law. So by framing it this way, the prosecutor is making the jury realize there is no gray area. It's either an accident, which the medical evidence disproves, or it's murder. But he's not finished. Let's jump back in.
I'm about to wrap up here in just a moment. Sit down and turn over the podium to Mr. Gamble. But I want you to think about something, okay? As you listen to him nitpick the evidence, and you heard the examination, you heard opening statements, you heard the examination of various witnesses, and so you already know it's coming. But as you hear him nitpick the evidence, I want you to keep this question in the back of your mind. What do any of these things really have to do with the death of J.D. Angeles? Did poor parenting, missing well baby doctor appointments, misusing a car seat, did those things kill this child? No, those things didn't kill this child. Would testing some dirty diaper that came out of the dumpster, or testing the vomit that was on Jay Williams' shirt and jacket, would testing those things, would interviewing some people in Colquitt 50 miles or 75 miles away from, now it's more than 50, right? They're like 75, 80 miles away from where this happened. We're going down to Colquitt and interviewing some people. Would that put somebody else in the room with Trinity Poague and the baby? Would that have put somebody else in a position to inflict this trauma? No. Those tests, those things, you're not going to get that. Did a bottle of rum or a dispute or a fight over social media passwords kill that child? No. What killed that child was beyond dispute. It was a massive, tremendous blow to the back of his head that cracked his skull from here to here. So, there's a smoke and mirror show coming, though. I promise you. There's a smoke and mirror show coming. And I was thinking about this in terms of how do you see through smoke? Okay, how do you clear the smoke? Right? Firemen. Okay, there's a house on fire. Firemen go in and there's smoke everywhere. They have to get through. They have to navigate through. The smoke will kill them. I mean, if you just breathe it in, it'll kill you. If you just accept it, if you just let it be there, if you don't fight against the smoke, it'll kill you. So what they do is they put on goggles, and a face mask, with a breathing apparatus and a breathing tank so they can navigate their way through the smoke until it clears and they can get to whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. That question, ladies and gentlemen, that question is that provides your goggles. Okay? That provides your breathing apparatus for getting through and seeing through the smoke that's coming. That girl killed that little boy. She killed that little boy. She cracked his skull out of anger, out of malice. We'll talk about all that later. She killed that little boy. She's the only person who could possibly have done it in the time frame in which it had to have occurred. Don't let these other things that don't have anything to do with the answer to that question, who killed J.D. Angeles? Don't let these other things cloud your vision and fog your mind.
Take a close look at Trinity Poague's face. She knows she is screwed. The prosecutor ends off his closing argument with mentioning the smoke and mirrors analogy, which is a very smart decision. Now, in this video, we didn't include the defense and or their strategy, but to give you guys the sum of what their strategy was, they pretty much used what's called trial by character assassination. They spent most of their defense trying to paint the parents as negligent or unfit. I mean, it's a calculated move to plant a seed of doubt, suggesting that if the home life was chaotic, perhaps perhaps the parents are the real villains or that the child was already at risk. And that is exactly why the prosecutor is calling this smoke and mirrors. It's a tactical warning to the jury to not get lost in the haze of irrelevant parenting failures. Legally, those missed doctor visits are red herrings, a distraction from the actual crime, which is what the defense is trying to build. Under Georgia law, the state only needs to prove proximate cause, meaning they must show a direct link between Trinity's actions and the fatal injury. The defense wants the jury to judge the parent's lifestyle, but the prosecution needs the jury to judge the medical evidence. Because at the end of the day, a messy diaper or a missed checkup doesn't explain how an infant ended up with his skull cracked from ear to ear. That requires massive, intentional, blunt force, and no amount of smoke can hide that kind of catastrophic trauma. And that's exactly how the prosecutor ends his closing argument. Now, we're going to go ahead and switch over to the child's father recalling the events leading up to the tragic event, which will be very important.
What happened when you went in the room?
She had him in her hands. It's like he's limp. I don't know what happened. So I threw the pizza, dropped it, and grabbed him and took off.
So she has him in her hands, and she said, "What?"
I don't know what's wrong. He's limp.
He's not.
Like he wasn't functional.
Okay. So you said you threw the pizza down. Where'd you throw the pizza down?
On the bed.
And what'd you do with the Walmart bags?
I dropped it in the bed.
Okay. And then what did you do?
Grab him and leave.
Okay. When you grabbed him and left, how did you leave? Where'd you go?
To the emergency room.
Did you go by yourself with him to the emergency room?
Yes.
What was the statement that Joni made
If
when she heard the report from the doctor?
If the baby dies, somebody's getting charged with murder.
If the baby dies, somebody's going to be charged with murder. When that statement was made, did Trinity Poague's demeanor or expression appear to change in any way?
Yes.
How did it change? Like what was her, her reaction to the statement, and then what did she do?
She got up and said, "I'm finna call my parents."
Okay. So did she leave that room then?
Yes.
This moment in the boyfriend's testimony is pretty devastating for the defense. He says the moment that the doctors mentioned police involvement in murder charges, Trinity's immediate reaction wasn't to grieve for the baby, it was to call her parent and protect herself. If you're innocent and a child is dying, your focus stays on the child. However, if you're guilty, your focus usually immediately shifts to the legal consequences of what you did. That, combined with her fell off the chair lie, is ultimately what sealed her fate. On December 5th, 2025, after only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned their final verdict. Trinity Madison Poague was found guilty on 5 of the 6 counts against her, including 2 counts of felony murder. During her sentencing, Judge W. James Seasmore Jr. told her plainly, "The bottom line is you're going to receive a sentence of life in prison, which is the approximate sentence for the conduct that you have been convicted of." Trinity was sentenced then to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years, plus an additional 20 years for the child cruelty charge to run concurrently. She was also stripped of her title as Miss Donaldsonville following her arrest. For the family of little JD Angels, this verdict finally brings a sense of justice, ensuring that the woman who ended a toddler's life in a dorm room will likely spend the rest of her own behind bars. As always, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments below. Do you think Trinity Poague got what she deserved? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one.